As we're sitting here tonight, there's a protest outside regarding ICE enforcement here in Chicago. The border was open in 2022 when the fentanyl that came through the southern border reached my daughter Kyla. If it was closed, I don't know if she would still be alive. I don't know for sure. But I do know that she's not. And it was because of the open border.
This is a big national security problem. This isn't grandpa's opioid crisis where kids are dying because they are hooked on opioids and the doctor is overprescribing the pills. The stuff that the kids are taking today, to make it really clear, is poison that's made in illicit labs in foreign environments that are being smuggled into America, and our families and communities are being destroyed.
And I mean this as a compliment. If you don't know, you can't be in gang investigations unless you're a badass. So that's a compliment, Terry. Please take it that way.
Business was good.
Yeah.
And it still is.
Being a police officer and being in law enforcement is truly one of the most noble things that a human being can do with their life. We need to remember that the police are not the problem and recognize that and figure out how to move forward. Hello. Tonight we have another episode of Wearing the Badge. I'm Garry McCarthy, and tonight we have two guests. We have one that's on Zoom, but I'm happy to report that this is Terry Almanza sitting next to me. She was a 28-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department who apparently we ran across each other a couple of times, and she reminded me of that and showed me some pictures. But Terry is also here with Derek Maltz, and Derek Maltz was a 28-year veteran, right, Derek, of the DEA?
Yes, sir.
Who ended his term as the acting administrator of the DEA for a couple of years. So we have a pretty interesting show tonight. We're going to talk about narcotics. Terry and I share a tragedy that she lost her daughter to narcotics. I lost my daughter to narcotics, and Derek has spent his career trying to stop people from losing their children and their loved ones to narcotics. So with that, Terry, give us a little bit more introduction to yourself, and we'll talk about what you're doing a little bit later on.
So my name is Terry Almanza. I am a retired Chicago police officer, 28 years. Worked in organized crime most of my career, retired from gang investigations. Born and raised in Chicago. Dad's Chicago police, brother's the police, sister was the police, just a big police family, great community. Married, 4 beautiful children. Retired in 2020 from the Chicago Police Department. Absolutely loved being in the police. Absolutely blessed life, and enjoyed the ride, great times.
And I mean this as a compliment. If you don't know, you can't be in gang investigations unless you're a badass. So that's a compliment, Terry. Please take it that way.
Business was good.
Yeah.
And it still is.
Yeah, plenty of work to be done.
Yes.
Derek, tell us a little bit more about your career. I'm sure you moved around a little bit.
Thanks for having me, Garry, and it's great to be on the show. What you doing, Terry? I spent 28 years in the DEA. I worked my way up from special agent in New York, and I eventually became the agent in charge of the DEA Special Operations Division outside of Washington, D.C. I built that synchronization center from 9 agencies to 30, going after transnational criminals. When I retired, I worked about 9 years in the private sector, and I was asked to come back and support the Trump administration as the acting DEA administrator, which I love doing. My father was in the DEA for 30 years. My brother died in Afghanistan, so I come from a patriotic family trying to support our American citizens and keep the country safe. As you can see in the background, Garry, I got a passion for supporting families like yours and Terry's who have lost loved ones to this chemical attack on our country. I started a collage project, started to spread awareness to save lives, because the families like yours and Terry's have worked tirelessly to try to save other kids' lives. So thank you for inspiring me to get out and to try to help other families, because we're all in this together. The country's under attack. There's deadly drugs throughout our communities. This is not a red or a blue issue. It's a red, white, and blue issue. Every American should care about this topic. So I appreciate and look forward to the conversation we're going to have.
Wow. Well, after hearing that, I feel like my bio is not that interesting anymore. But I will tell you, my dad was also a New York City police officer, so all three of us have that in common. My oldest brother was a New York State trooper, now retired, also played sports at Syracuse like Derek did. And I guess I missed the boat on the 28-year issue. I'm still around policing, and I went on in 1981, which I can't believe how long ago that is. Derek, why don't you give us a bigger picture of what you see that's happening in this country? Maybe even throw out some numbers and talk about what's happening in the country, and then Terry and I will share our stories and kind of drill down on hopefully some solutions and things that we could do moving forward.
Okay, Garry, so from my professional experience and my career working not only with law enforcement, with the families who have lost their children, I would say that right now America is engaged in a chemical war against our adversary in China. We have the Mexican cartels that are partners now with the Chinese criminals, and they are flooding our communities with synthetic drugs. Not just fentanyl, not just cocaine and methamphetamine, but we're talking about, very, very dangerous chemicals like nitazene, edenitazene, metanitazene, isonitazene. There's a whole class of very powerful synthetic opioids that are coming out of China to this day. We also are being flooded with xylazine, which is a horse tranquilizer, which is literally causing necrosis, the rotting of human tissue in humans, and people are literally like zombies in the streets of America. So, to give you an idea, last year in 2024, the DEA seized 60 million fake pills and 8,000 pounds of fentanyl powder. This year, they seized about 34 million fake pills and about 7,000 pounds of fake powder. Why that's important is that, according to the DEA previous administrator, 5 out of 10 of these pills contain a potential lethal dose of fentanyl. So 5 out of 10 times, there's a good chance that you will die if you take one of these pills. Unfortunately, the kids in America are being deceived to death because mental illness, depression, anxiety is on the rise. The services in America are terrible and have been for years. And so what happens is these young Americans, they turn to drugs for help. They're not getting properly educated. And unfortunately, the parents are getting that call that their loved ones are, dead. And so just to give you another statistic, like last year, just fentanyl alone, the CBP, Customs and Border Protection, they seized 21.9 thousand pounds of fentanyl coming into America, okay? That's a lot of fentanyl. Already this year, they're at 11,500 pounds. So the bottom line is that we have adversaries. On one hand, like the cartels are trying to maximize their profits to make as much money as they can. And the Chinese criminal networks are trying to destabilize our country using chemical substances under the disguise of drug addiction. So they're trying to keep their fingerprints off the direct deaths of our citizens, using the Mexican cartels as a proxy to bring these dangerous substances into the country. But let me just make it clear. When I was running the Special Operations Division, just to give you an example, this is a picture. I don't know how well you can see it. That's $207 million in $100 denominations, probably the largest cash seizure in the history of the world on a drug case. That was taken from one Chinese chemical broker in Mexico City 18 years ago. And the reason I bring that up is because this particular Chinese chemical broker has had a long relationship with the Mexican cartel. So they didn't just establish their relations with China yesterday. And the Chinese are also involved in majority of the money laundering for the cartels. So they're providing the chemicals, they're providing the money laundering services. So this is a big national security problem. This isn't grandpa's opioid crisis where kids are dying because they are hooked on opioids and the doctor is overprescribing the pills. The stuff that the kids are taking today, to make it really clear, is poison that's made in illicit labs in foreign environments that are being smuggled into America, and our families and communities are being destroyed. Just look at a little baby over my corner. There's a 1-year-old Dominican boy right here. Went to daycare in New York City, and the mother got the call because the kid was dead. Because the fentanyl is everywhere, and this poor kid was on the mats, and he inadvertently touched this powder and must have put his fingers in his mouth, and he died. So anyway, we could talk a lot more, but I'd love to hear your story and Terry's story, because this is what has inspired me to stay very passionate and focused. I mean, your daughter, Kyla, or Kayla, is it Kayla or Kyla?
Kyla.
Kyla. And Sydney, you know, they are proud of their parents and what you guys are doing, and I'm proud to be standing side by side with you. I love to see the grieving families putting, you know, the grief into action. Okay, they're not just sitting on the sidelines. They're selflessly trying to save other lives, and thank you so much for that.
Wow, that was a lot, Derek. I actually have a lot of follow-up. I got to make sure I say this correctly. As we're sitting here tonight, there's a protest outside regarding ICE enforcement here in Chicago. I know this. I know that the border was open in 2022 when the fentanyl that came through the southern border reached my daughter, Kyla. And if it was closed, I don't know if she would still be alive. I don't know for sure. But I do know that she's not. And it was because of the open border. And my daughter is the story that you've heard a million times. You're going to hear Terry's story about her daughter, Sydney. Kyla was a three-sport athlete in high school, got into a car accident in her junior year, in June of her junior year, actually. Her ankle got pulverized, not broken, pulverized. It was like a puzzle trying to get put back together. Short story, numerous surgeries, probably 5 or 6, I forget how many. Loaded her up with OxyContin, 18 years of addiction. And in June of 2022, I got the phone call from my ex-wife telling me that she hadn't spoken to Kyla. Could I get somebody to go and do a well-being check on my daughter, who was living in the Bronx where we grew up? And that was it. She was gone. What's troubling to me is in 2022, I read a statistic that there were 110,000 overdoses in this country, deaths by overdose. And the vast majority were substances like fentanyl and MNDA?
MDMA.
And DMA, sorry. You know, in the 10-year Vietnam War, we lost 58,000 Americans. Just think about that. 10 years of warfare, we lost pretty much half as many people as we lost in 2022. And the outrage just isn't there. And the people who are fighting against some of the things, and I'm not saying all of them, I don't want to get too political, but fighting against a closed border and getting criminals out of our country. I spent 44 years in law enforcement trying to stop people from getting hurt, murdered, and so on, whether it be by robbery, gunfire, or narcotics. And I don't understand what the issue is. We're forgetting the most basic principles in this country. So I'm gonna stop there because I could go on forever. But that's my daughter's story. There's nothing like it, I can tell you that. Losing a child is just beyond anything anybody can imagine. And it hurts every day.
Chicago, I think it was 1980, there were 7 people in America that were poisoned to death by cyanide in Tylenol. And the whole country was outraged. Front page of the news. Meanwhile, we could have 100,000 a year dying, and the media wasn't even talking about it.
Terry, come on, pick me up here.
So very sorry for your loss. And, everybody that's tuning in, somebody knows someone that has lost a loved one to illicit drug poisoning. Something that I never would have thought would have happened, in our family. Chicago police officer, husband's a Chicago firefighter, daughter's 18 years old, beautiful athlete, getting ready to go play college volleyball, just signed a collegiate scholarship. Brilliant, beautiful beyond measure, silly, fun, artistic, such a gift. And I have 3 other children. And, I think oftentimes people don't understand how this happens. And I think the stigma oftentimes tied to drug use, drug abuse, it can be so very cruel, and not understanding how that came to be, and like with your daughter, with her injury, I've connected with so many people that, their children had a root canal or wisdom teeth or what have you, and, got addicted to, various different substances. And Sydney had lost her biological mom when she was only 3 years old. I can't imagine, you say there's nothing more horrific than to lose a child, but I think about this, little girl who, came home and her mommy's gone. Her mom was sick with pancreatic cancer, and she died when Sid was 3. When Sid was 4 and 5 years old, she was the victim of repeated sexual assaults by a family member. Sid held on to all of that, never shared with anybody that pain that she endured, carried it for the bulk of her life. At about 14 and 15 years old, we started recognizing that Sid was struggling, grades declining, not wanting to play volleyball anymore, isolating herself a lot, different group of friends. Something was going on. And as a mom and a police officer, you're going to turn the house upside down to figure out, or I identified, what had happened to her. We got her into some therapy and got the family into therapy. And Sydney hooked up with a close associate, and they said, hey, take this ecstasy. It's a club drug. It's fun. And you can kind of check out for a bit. And she did. And sadly, she did. She checked out, and she never came back. And we lost her that night, May 31st, 2015. I still can't believe it. It's been a little bit over 10 years, and I can't believe that this is, my reality and our family's reality, and we are survivors. We survive this horrific loss. And I had to do something with that pain. And so here I am today, and thank you for inviting me.
First of all, thank you for being here, and I'm sorry for your loss. And Derek, I appreciate everything that you've done in your career to try and prevent these things from happening. But to support what Terry said, I want to make it clear. At Kyla's memorial service, the first thing I said was, there's no shame in this. And then I went on to say, everybody knows somebody who's going through this right now.
Yes.
And, with 110 overdoses, 110,000 overdoses in 1 year, I think we could safely assume that, can't we? But the other thing is, the shame is on the people who allowed this to happen. That's where the shame really lies. And like I said, I don't want to get too political, but, we were talking a little bit before, and Derek mentioned that his brother was killed in combat. My dad was a World War II Marine, and this is not what he fought for. He fought to protect this country, not to make it vulnerable, then went on, naturally, to become a police officer. And, of course, Mom was a nurse. That's what everybody did, cops and nurses and firemen and back in the day. So the shame isn't on our family. The shame isn't on us. The shame isn't on our daughters. The shame is on the people who allowed this to happen. And it's still a threat to us. And those people out there right now don't realize it. And that's very, very troubling to me. The ignorance that people have regarding some of the policies that we unfortunately embrace in this country sometimes cause these things to happen. And there's no two ways about it. Like I said, I don't know if Kyla would be alive today if the border was closed, but I know she's not. And I know it was open, and I know where it came from. So, Derek, you want to pick that up a little bit? Because
Yeah, I mean,
but by the way, you two are doing something really special about it. I'm hearing about it and talking about it, and that's all I could do right now. At least that's what I'm doing. But Terry started a foundation, and one of the things that I've been saying for a while, and I didn't know that Terry had success at this, is that if you sell fentanyl in this day and age, there is a 100% chance that you're going to kill somebody. Murder somebody by giving them that drug. So these cases, unfortunately, we as police have been investigating them as overdoses, simply overdoses, not even thinking about what has been happening here. Terry had an opportunity and took advantage of it. But Derek, I want to go back to you. I'm sorry that I interrupted both of you, but Terry has a great story to tell about what she was able to do. Go ahead, Derek. I'm sorry.
So what I was going to say is, without being political, like when you keep the border wide open, you're allowing the Mexican cartels to not only operate with impunity, but they were making billions and billions of dollars from the human trafficking networks that they ran at the border. They were charging every one of those illegal immigrants to come into this country, and they were charging a lot of money for the high value targets that are now in America. So for people that are watching the news, you may have heard this past week about the national security threats of Al-Qaeda operatives being in America, and that came from the highest levels of Americans' government. And that's because we have no idea who these millions of people are that are in America. So by allowing that border to be wide open, you cause our assets, our resources in Border Patrol, in the CBP, to be consumed with babysitting, administrative paperwork, instead of doing what they signed up for, is to keep Americans safe and secure. So yes, the criminal networks, not just the Mexican cartels, they took total advantage of the weaknesses and the vulnerabilities at the border, and that's why our country's been saturated with these substances, right? So this is a big national security threat, and I was helping, the families and working with the families for about 8 years now, and I was trying to get people in the media to understand, and in Congress, that these are really not overdoses. These are poisonings, because these kids are not taking pills when they think it's Adderall or they think it's Percocet or oxycodone. They're trying to get help. They're hurting inside for whatever reason, right? The world's a little crazy right now. After COVID, it became a little more crazy. But so they're being deceived to death. So these are poisonings. Back in Chicago, I think it was 1980, there were 7 people in America that were poisoned to death by cyanide in Tylenol. And the whole country was outraged. Front page of the news, opening stories of the media, Tylenol is poison. Meanwhile, we could have 100,000 a year dying, and the media wasn't even talking about it. Garry, one of the things that pisses me off is that on all the families that I interacted with, including Terry, people never even heard of fentanyl. The government wasn't even warning the public about fentanyl so they could talk to their children and educate them about these pills. There was no conversation. And right now, even today, we need a massive education blitz. We need social media influencers. We need professional athletes. We need role models to get out on the social media sites where the kids are 24 hours a day and educate these kids, because they're not watching mainstream media. They're not watching cable news. They're actually on those phones 24/7. So we need to educate them where they're at. But this is a basic concept. I didn't go to Harvard or Yale or MIT. This is common sense. Put the messages out where they're at. Get mandatory education in schools. And Garry, another failure that we don't talk about too often is the CDC's horrific statistical reporting on this crisis. During COVID, every night on TV, we had COVID deaths, COVID cases around the world. We don't even know how many people died from fentanyl. The statistics are not timely and they're inaccurate, and all the parents know that, all the families know that. So we don't really know exactly how many, and think of how many Americans are being saved by Narcan. Why are they not telling us how many, known Narcan reversals have been made in America? That's easy to do. Fire departments, police departments, hospitals, they keep track of this. You're not going to get 100% because a lot of people are getting stuff and bringing it home, and you're never going to get that reporting. But if you knew how many people were being saved by Narcan, maybe the public would be outraged to hear hundreds and thousands of people, millions of people have been saved by Narcan because the poison is everywhere. But they're not even doing that. And so we're working hard with all these families, this army of families, to pull them together. We got a really great incoming drug czar. Sarah Carter is my friend. We're going to be working with her and the families to start really blitzing the networks, blitzing social media, getting education in the schools. Because without that education, the kids are going to continue to turn to drugs. And I hope this administration provides a lot more services for mental illness and addiction because it's out of control. These aren't drug addicts. These are babies with no future now. They've been buried from fentanyl poisoning. This is what America is turned into. So the public needs to wake the hell up.
So I guess in my 20-year career, this was probably my best arrest ever, and I was not the one that actually put the cuffs on these two, but absolutely was the driving force to ensure that there was some accountability. And I do agree, there is no justice, in a homicide. There's, I'm Catholic. I hope that, we can rehabilitate these people. Not everybody can be rehabilitated, but I do believe that, a lot of people do frown upon the drug-induced homicide statute, and that we're these vigilante mothers, and and it's not that. And you didn't fail, your daughter by any means, and I feel that I am proud of the arrest, of the advocacy, of the foundation. Our girls aren't coming back, but I do feel the biggest win in this is that we are setting a precedent. We are sending a message to these people that are out there peddling this poison that will not be tolerated. And we can't bring our girls back, but if in our advocacy we can save a life, stop them from continuing that lifestyle and delivering these poisons, yes, then that is a win. But so when Sydney passed on May 31st, 2015, I immediately knew that it was likely some sort of controlled substance. She was an otherwise healthy young lady. I went in, I don't know if it's just being the police or a mom or what it was, but I wanted justice. I wanted to know who was behind this, and I wanted them held accountable. And the Chicago Police Department immediately told me that, hey, this is we don't investigate these cases criminally. It's just not our protocol. They closed the investigation and classified it as non-criminal. I just could not accept that. And I think that oftentimes, and I do feel that a lot of families struggle with, that there was no justice, that there was no investigation, that there was no accountability. I don't think that there's anything crueler of our judicial system than to task a bereaved parent with advocating for justice in the homicide of their child. We're struggling to get out of bed every day, much less having to send emails, speak with detectives, hunt down leads. So I'm thankful that, for my police career. I'm thankful for the, connections that I've made. I connected with Will County and Lake County and identified that they are investigating these cases criminally, and the number of poisonings have reduced significantly in those counties. So I went back to the Chicago Police Department and said, I want an investigation. We have the drug-induced homicide statute on the books since 1989, and we need to start using it. And it took me about 17 months, a lot of rallies, a lot of meeting with, the bosses and pushing. I knew the day that Sydney died, who was responsible for giving her that lethal dose. I could tell based off of a call log. And 17 months later, they brought in both of the persons, Brent Tyson and Cynthia Parker, and questioned them. They both admitted to selling Sydney, who they identified as an inexperienced user, a lethal dose of MDMA, ecstasy. And they were both charged. They made the other one culpable as well. And they were released out on bond in Cook County. Shortly thereafter, they were both picked up again and they were both picked up again selling a lethal dose of MDMA, and I think it was 110 hits of ecstasy to an undercover Orland Park officer. So, again, what I'm doing, what I'm advocating for, no, our girls aren't coming back, but these people don't stop, and we need to send that message to these dealers that what they are taking part in is criminal, and if they are in the chain of delivery, they can and will be charged. And I'm so incredibly proud of the foundation, of the advocacy, of the parents that stand up and say no more, that many of them, even knowing that they will not ever see justice in their children's case, they still come out and rally and speak up and support other families, because we don't want anybody else to carry that heartache and to survive such a horrific loss. But so the foundation is Drug-Induced Homicide, poisoningofamerica.org. We are a nationwide organization. We have chapters in every state, and I guess I never thought that. I thought I was going to be retired and, out on a boat somewhere and, relaxing. And I think I work harder today than I ever have. But it's such important work. And, a lot of people are, trying to stop this stuff from coming over the border. But what I do, is a lot different than many other organizations. And we're trying to stop this stuff that's right in our very own backyard.
Sure.
So.
And I really commend you for that, and I apologize because I was still a superintendent when this occurred. I remember that we had a spate of overdoses on the west side at one point, and we jumped all hands on deck on it. And we ended up making some arrests, but I don't know what they were charged with, come to think of it. But I do remember that happening, and it was later in my tenure, which was probably close to the time frame that Sydney got poisoned. So, Derek, how do you work with these organizations? And like I said, these have to be investigated as murders. They really do.
So I'm going to first tell you a quick story, and this is a compliment to Terry because I really admire her. So long story short, there was a mom in the state of Indiana that lost her son, and she couldn't get, investigative work being done against this perpetrator. So I was posting a lot of videos on the Lost Voices of Fentanyl and Drug-Induced Homicide social media sites. And my buddy, who is the number 2 in charge, actually the number 1 in charge of DEA in Indianapolis, which is he was very aggressively pursuing these murderers. So, long story short, Terry on her own, she sent this video of my buddy Mike Gannon over to this mom, who then contacted Mike Gannon, and within a pretty short amount of time, Mike's agents and investigators in DEA Indianapolis investigated the case where the kid was, convicted and had a pretty decent jail sentence from what I remember. And it was stuff like that, it's just one person, I get it, but Terry works tirelessly to help other families in any way she can. So for me, I'll tell you, I did a documentary in 2017-18 with Sarah Carter about the poisoning of Americans and the wide open border and the border issues. And basically what happened was I started interacting with a lot of families who lost their loved ones to fentanyl. And once I listened to their story, I got really angry. I got angry because of a lot of reasons, but the fact that the government wasn't doing a basic responsibility of educating the public on these new threats with the synthetic drugs. And so I started going out. My first rally was at the Chinese embassy in 2021 with Lost Voices of Fentanyl. And I'm pretty sure Terry was at that rally where I met her in person. And it was like literally families from around the country that were just trying to get some attention, to spread the awareness. They weren't going to save their own kids, but they selflessly were trying to get the message. And I was pissed off because none of the media showed up. And then one media network, I won't mention them, showed up to interview me because it was right around the time of the Afghanistan disaster where 13, brave men and women died at the airport in Kabul. And I was being interviewed about Afghanistan as I'm standing in front of the Chinese embassy with these families trying to get attention. So I turned the whole thing around on the media, and then I started making these collages, and I started bringing the collages to Congress and started zipping them around and waking people up with pictures of regular people. Look at this here. I'm going to show you what I got this week. And this is going to be my secret weapon at a keynote speaking event I have shortly. Look at this beautiful T-shirt I got from the families that lost their little babies. These aren't drug addicts. These are babies with no future now. They've been buried from fentanyl poisoning. This is what America is turned into. So the public needs to wake the hell up. This is not the old days where someone's shooting up heroin in an alley in Harlem or the Lower East Side. This is young kids and little babies that are inadvertently coming across this stuff. But like I said before, and I'll say it again, why I am screaming and yelling here in my basement, why I'm participating is because the families have energized me. Jackie Robinson had a saying many years ago. A life isn't important, it's like the impact, except the impact it has on others. So for me, I spent my career, I had a very, good career in the DEA. I loved every single moment of my career. And now I feel like I could give back with my experience and my network. I have a huge network of law enforcement, and I just want to help these families any way I can. And it's a very important for me when I hear family members call me the voice of the voiceless. Because until I started getting on those national TV shows, they weren't even talking about this crisis. The local stations were. And remember, Garry, we had an emergency briefing to Eric Holder, the former Attorney General, in 2014, warning him and the other leaders in the federal government about the death and destruction that was coming our way because the Chinese criminals were now working very, very closely with the cartels and distributing this deadly fentanyl, synthetic opioids. And before that, they were pushing out K2 and spice and bath salts and the synthetic marijuana being sold in grocery stores and bodegas and gas stations. That substance was coming from China as well. And it was made in some of the same labs. And they were killing our citizens. And now what they're doing, Garry, what a lot of people aren't talking about, there's Chinese marijuana grow operations all over the country, very high THC marijuana, and they're putting Chinese pesticides on the leaf. So when the kids are smoking what they think is just simple marijuana, They're going to the hospitals. They're rushing to the emergency room. They're being diagnosed with marijuana, schizophrenia, psychosis, depression, anxiety. And in my opinion, in my years of experience, this is part of the plan, the strategy from the Chinese criminal networks to undermine America and to kill our citizens and harm our citizens with these synthetic drugs. We're losing record amounts of military members. We're losing celebrities. We're losing, Robert De Niro's grandson died. Ray Lewis, the professional NFL player, his kid died. The list goes on and on and on. So the American public is just not paying attention to these details and the policies. I'm just thankful right now, under the current administration, they're starting to hold the criminals who are killing our kids at record levels accountable. Yeah, we're using kinetic strikes against drug boats right now. So far, we had 3 successful strikes. Most people would say, that's a little bit aggressive. Well, guess what, America? No terrorist organization in the history of this country, if you took Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS, and you combine how many Americans that they've killed, it wouldn't even come close to the hundreds of thousands of Americans that have been killed from deadly fentanyl and these synthetic opioids. So you know what? Accountability is important. We have to reestablish law and order, and we have to, stand up for Americans first.
When election time comes around, they talk about the kitchen table, right? They talk about what are the things that people are talking about around the kitchen table. And like Derek says, with the education, we've got to get this into the home so the parents realize, not just the children get the education all at the same time. In 2014, I'm thinking back, and I was the vice president of the Major City Chiefs Association at the time. And I remember we got probably wasn't top secret, but it was a classified briefing about the threat assessment across the United States. And the military told us, the Major City Chiefs Association, that China was the #1 threat to our existence back in 2014. So that tells me that the president knew it, that Eric Holder knew it, that everybody at that level definitely knew it. And instead, that's when all of a sudden policing became the target. That was after Ferguson.
So let me interrupt you on something that's very important because of what you brought up. If you look at Chris Wray, when he was the FBI director, he warned America repeatedly that China was the #1 national security threat. But at the same time, in those 4 years, his boss and the Homeland Security Secretary, they allowed actually record amounts of Chinese nationals illegally to come into this country and then come into America to establish probably massive counterintelligence operations and these Chinese grow operations and other types of nefarious activity, human trafficking, sex trafficking. And you scratch your head and you say, how is that possible? If the director of the FBI is warning everyone on this national security threat from China, but yet we're allowing them in at record levels. So thank you for bringing that up, Garry.
Well, and the other thing that you mentioned that's kind of lost in this conversation, and this has to do with the open border and allowing people to walk in. And I've been saying for years, you can't walk into Germany. You can't walk into any European country, to my knowledge, and just show up at a door and knock and say, hey, let me in. But post 9/11, which is a little bit personal to me because I was at the World Trade Center, how can you open the borders? And you mentioned Al-Qaeda coming through those borders. And I am absolutely positive that at some point we're going to pay the price for that. And if you recall, all the talk back in 2001 was about sleeper cells, how many were here, how many of those terrorists were waiting to get triggered to go to the next level. And I am absolutely positive that we're going to pay for that at some point. We can't keep doing what we're doing and expect to succeed, right? And here in Chicago, when I ran for mayor, which was a wholesale failure, one of the things that I adopted saying was, if you think we're doing well, then just keep doing what we're doing, right? And at the time, the murder rate had gone up from 419 when I was superintendent to 767. And I was like, okay, I guess we're doing great. Don't worry about it. So I don't know what it's going to take to unravel the conundrum that we've created in this country. Right now, ICE is the focus, not the people who came here, who brought those drugs here, not the criminals who are committing those acts. And by the way, we should be a welcoming country, right? In my genealogy, we have it on both sides. I actually was able to trace my genealogy back on my mother's side to a family that got here in 1600, which is pretty amazing. But by the same token, my dad's family came from Ireland because they had to flee what were known as the Black and Tans during the Troubles, as they were called in Ireland. So we have to be a welcoming country. We're all immigrants in some fashion. Even the indigenous people came here from someplace else way back centuries ago. But there has to be a process, and we have to provide for the public safety. So if we think that's good enough and we don't want any help, then let's not do it. But if you look at the wanted posters of the individuals who were being removed, I'm pretty satisfied with that. I don't want those people walking the streets. I have an 8-year-old son, and I'm worried about his future in this country right now.
And I will say, so in regards to the homicide rates in Chicago, something I've been tracking, obviously, for a long time. The sad part that so many people don't realize and isn't spoken of is that these poisonings, fatal poisonings, are not included in the in the count, in the stats. And I'm
not part of the UCR.
And they are actually, well, because they're classified as accidental deaths, which should not be, but they are double of what our homicides are easily. I'd say probably back to 2017 or something. Since Sidney passed away in 2015, Chicago, in the city of Chicago alone, there is over 10,000 people that have died from opioid-related deaths in Chicago. And of those 10,000, and I will say I'm so very thankful to the Chicago Police Department. Retired Chief Denahan brought me in. We worked on a protocol. We came up.
President's the best.
Yes, he's the best. And we came up with a protocol. So when officers respond to these cases, what are we inventorying? What are we looking for? How do we ensure that we are presenting a strong case? And then following it up even further and inviting me out to trainings at the police academy with newly promoted detectives on this protocol. But to have 10,000 people just in the city of Chicago alone that have died from opioid-related deaths since 2015, there has only been 5 cases, to my knowledge, that have resulted in a drug-induced homicide conviction in Chicago of those 10,000 opioid-related deaths. And so, again, I'm so very thankful that we do have a protocol, in place, and we are doing training, but we also need to make sure that we are putting these into play and that we are investigating these cases as the homicides that they are.
Well, do we know, Derek, do you know how many states have drug-induced homicide laws on the books? Do you have any idea?
I do not know. Terry might know. She's an expert.
I believe it's about...
I'm sorry. I thought you were the expert, Derek.
Not on the laws, no. I'm an enforcement operations guy.
I believe it's about 32, I think. But what's nice is we have the felony murder. So, when people say, well, we don't have that. Well, you have felony murder. And
well, I'm not sure about that after the Safety Act.
Okay.
The Safety Act has really restricted what's considered felony murder at this point.
Well, that's in Illinois.
In Illinois.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we have the drug-induced homicide statute.
Right.
But like elsewhere. So.
But it doesn't do us any good to have the tool and not use it.
100%. And that's exactly what it is. To know that this statute has been out since 1989 and, here I was on the job. I never heard of drug-induced homicide. I just knew that if somebody was out there selling drugs, that was criminal. And then if somebody died as a result of that sale, how could that no longer be criminal? And so
I didn't know about it until my business partner brought you to my attention. I didn't know that it existed here. And I've been here since 2011.
Well, I think a lot of people just, they shifted on the victim and that they made this choice. And, our girls they never made a choice to die. They didn't want to die. They had a whole life ahead of them. And they paid with their lives. That choice, they paid with their lives. They're gone. They're not coming back. But there's somebody else on the other side of the coin, which is the person that's, peddling this poison. And there needs to be accountability there. And again, not just for the justice and the accountability part of it, but because we want to make sure that they're not out there selling again to that next person.
And I don't want this to happen to my worst enemy. Well, okay, I don't want it to happen to my worst enemy. So anything we could do, what's the value of one life? I've always had this crazy thought process where if I stop for the yellow light and don't go through it and the car behind me has a child in it who's going to cure cancer, it could change the world. If that person went through the light and got into a car accident, right? So you don't know how the dominoes are going to fall. But what we're doing is not working. And when I was in New York, I actually wrote a narcotics strategy, which we had never had before. And it was focused on reducing crime and reducing narcotics-related locations. Not just going to a corner, locking up 5 guys for possession and 2 guys for sale and coming back the next day and doing it again, and the next day and the next day and the next day. And it was very effective as far as reducing crime and eliminating conditions. I don't think we think enough like that. How do we fix this problem? And what you're doing, obviously, is very, very important. And now that I know about this drug...
I'm going to reel you in. I got you now.
Yeah, I know. You had me at hello.
There you go.
You had me at hello. But Kyla's mom, Gina, went to Times Square for an event this year in St. Patrick's Cathedral, and they had pictures of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of young people who died from opioid poisoning. Well, we've got to start facing the fact that we have a problem. And like I said, I don't want this to happen to anybody else, but it's happening on a daily basis. So we have to do something to stop it. And I have enormous respect for Derek and yourself for doing what you're doing. I do have a platform. I get to do this pretty much once a week and kind of just see who we could get to the table, because there's always stuff to talk about in policing, right? And we've had all sorts of different people here. But this is a conversation that shouldn't end right here. This is a conversation that, when election time comes around, they talk about the kitchen table, right? They talk about what are the things that people are talking about around the kitchen table. And like Derek says, with the education, we've got to get this into the home so the parents realize, not just the children get the education all at the same time. So we've got to wrap it up here. And I'm going to close this session like we close every other one that we do, based on both Terry's and Derek's experience. There's nothing more noble in my book than being a police officer that a human being can do with their life, because every day you have the opportunity to make a difference in somebody else's world. There's other noble professions out there, doctors, religious people, priests, rabbis, so on. But this is one where you intercede on a daily basis of bad things happening. And we have to take a different look at this. We have to look at stopping it, not just doing something about it and recognizing that we have a problem. So thank you for watching. Please continue watching Wearing the Badge. We've got, I think, 13 or 14 episodes up right now. We're getting great reviews. So thank you. Keep going on and taking a look at us. And we'll be back with our next show very soon. Thank you for watching.